Hey, what's up? It's John Bear. In this episode, I'm going to talk to a very special friend of mine, Taylor Ruddle. I met Taylor first in Japan, and since then, he's continuously impressed me with his graphic design. At the time, he was working there at a company doing graphic design, but he quickly picked up more skills such as web design and working with Unity. Taylor is a man of many talents, and he's also a stand-up comedian. But in this episode, we're going to focus on the creative entrepreneurship side. Mostly when it comes to graphic design, we're going to talk about things such as setting expectations for clients. We're also going to touch upon how to get clients as a graphic designer. We also dive into how to price yourself. Finally, we talk about the importance of having a vast skill set within the realm of design work. As a graphic designer or any sort of creative entrepreneur, you want to set yourself up as the go-to guy for your clients for any sort of creative work. So we go deep into the importance of adding more skill sets to your toolbox. We also talk about the power of just saying yes whenever the client asks if you can do something for them. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I hope you guys enjoy as well. Help me in welcoming Taylor Ruddle. All right, Taylor, so just tell me real quick now, what is your line of creative work right now?
Predominantly, it's like graphic design for print. I work at the newspaper. It's like my day job. And I do all sorts of little freelance projects on the side, mostly to do with event promotion, and then a lot of podcast covers and logos are probably the main ones, yeah.
Yeah, you have an Instagram for that, right? It's called Design by Champ.
Logo by Champ, but it is not very active.
Logo by Champ.
I've figured that because you know how Instagram's user base are quite young, you get a lot of people that sort of don't take it seriously and they mess you around a little bit. And I eventually learned it just was not worth the headache of trying to negotiate with these kids.
Yeah, I imagine with your line of work, a lot of people are trying to undercut the value of your work, trying to get cheaper deals, or I guess some of your main headaches would be like people asking for source files and all that stuff, right?
It's interesting in that I've almost had the opposite problem in that I'll prepare all of these wonderful print-ready files for people, and the first email to come back will be, why can't I use this as my Twitter avatar? And the whole thing, this is something that I learned from you actually, was to set the expectations before you talk about anything else, like what to the customer is what would make them have like a satisfying result. And it saved me a lot of time now to find out that really all they want is a picture they can have on their phone or on their Twitter account, and I don't need to go through all the trouble of preparing the files for print because they're probably never going to use them for it. So I guess kind of the opposite of what you asked me. You do get some people that try to sneak, like if you design a poster for them, they want an editable version that you can change the dates and everything like that on, in which case, maybe they're trying to be a little bit sneaky there. Yeah,
it's unfortunate because for somebody in creative design, having return clients is very important. So you'd rather want to be able to design future posters for them rather than them just having one design to reuse every single time.
Sometimes, though, it's not any maliciousness on their end. It's more like they just don't want to cause you any hassle to have to, just to change like a time or something like that, which they can easily do themselves. But you can never tell, unless you know them really well, how sketchy they are. It could just be that they're trying to be considerate for me.
Cool. You've done some like board game art as well in the past, haven't you?
Yeah, quite a lot actually. This is a case where actually having an active Twitter account really seems to be would serve you well if you're interested in, like, say you've got a viewer out there that's interested in doing some work for either indie video games or for board games. Like they have really active communities, and the guy who does Swordsfall, if you want to check that out, it's at www.swordsfall.com. He's a really good advocate for his artists. He's always retweeting our work or telling people to follow. Like I don't have a lot of followers, but for someone like me who barely uses Twitter, I think I've got nearly 500, which is, I would say, predominantly from tabletop RPG community. So yeah, I would say in terms of that, Twitter account would serve you really well to make the connections you need to pick up work, because I think the image and video uploading is pretty solid on Twitter, and that's how a lot of people showcase their work is on Twitter. Yeah.
All right, so we've already touched a little bit on Instagram and Twitter. So it sounds to me that you would rather recommend Twitter. So if somebody listening right now is thinking about getting into creative design as a creative entrepreneur, you would rather recommend Twitter as their sort of main home base.
I think it depends on what area you want to design in. Like if you're trying to get into esports or I don't know what you'd call it, general branding for an influencer, then Instagram is definitely your go-to. You will just have to deal with people being a little bit more unprofessional. I think that's probably the only difference, is that people are way more casual on Instagram, and because there's no contract or anything like that, they're pretty quick to like just drop you or ghost you if they're if they feel like they're not getting what they need out of it. But if you're wanting to do, like I said, indie games or board games, there's probably more. I think the comic book artwork community is quite big on Twitter as well. I'm not super involved with it. And then I would say just for general branding and design work, your go-to is definitely going to be Reddit for that one.
So how is Reddit compared to the other ones in terms of building a rep and a following? Because people couldn't follow you until very recently on Reddit, right?
I would say for building a following, it's actually probably more about how you interact with your clients once you get them off of Reddit. Like, you know how when you're on a dating app, you want to get them anything like real, so to speak, like a phone number or a Facebook account. As soon as you get away from the dating app, suddenly it's real, and you kind of you're interacting with each other. I feel like it's a little bit the same. Previous clients.
That's a good analogy.
Well, yeah, it seems to be working. But previous clients will never really reach out the second time on Reddit, but they'll just send me another email. So I think it depends on your bedside, like how you interact with them and the correspondence after Reddit, that you can build up a regular sort of customer base. Like I have the board game people are quite good because they're always tinkering away and they always need graphics done. So it'll be small things here and there, but it's pretty consistent. So it's a good niche to get into, I think.
But so I imagine maybe for design work, getting a following is not as important. Maybe it's better for you just to cold call clients, reach out to them, try to meet their needs, and then you build your client base more manually rather than like trying to generate leads through people finding you on these profiles.
I think I would agree with you there. I imagine there's a certain degree of people that have a style that someone would seek out. It's a little bit like a tattoo artist. You know how if you want a tattoo in a specific style, you'll look online to find the tattoo artist that consistently does that style that you like. And maybe people, I know friends of mine, I don't have any tattoos, but I have a lot of really heavily tattooed friends that will be fans of certain artists. So maybe it is like that with graphic designers. Like I'm a big fan of a guy called Aaron Draplin, and it's the kind of thing where just because of his content, I'll check out anything he does. But it's like, because it is, I don't want to say a craft or it's a service at the end of the day. So of course the product or the final design is going to speak louder than any kind of, like you can have the sickest folio in the world and the best interaction, but if your design is crap, then eventually no one's going to hire you. So I would say it's kind of like maybe your branding and your persona online can get people in the door, but at the same time, you still have to be good at what you do.
I mean, it's always a tricky balance, isn't it? Like you have to have your own style, but at the same time, well, I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself in the client's shoes. Like if you're a designer and let's say you've got like some ego going along with your style, and then you get a client that says they want you to redo it, then you could be like, no, this is my style, this is what you hired me for, but you still need to be flexible to meet their needs. I'm probably not using the proper words here, but I'm imagining that there's a balance there between meeting expectations and like doing something that's congruent with your style, I guess.
I think one thing I've found with just the reviews or the feedback I've got from clients is that one of the things that they're most happy to have happen is when you take feedback from them and you can modify stuff on the go. So I think, that's an interesting balance to find, because obviously they're going to come to you for some reason, especially if it's a particular style that you have. But I think for designers, there's do you know the Japanese word shokunin?
Shokunin. For like our viewers, maybe you might want to explain for them.
It's like a craftsman. And I heard it explained that there's a guy on YouTube called David Bull he's a foreigner, and he does really good woodblock carving. And a lot of the other Japanese craftsmen used to just kind of like refer like, oh, you're just a hobbyist, not a craftsman. And the difference that they saw was that the hobbyist can decide what he wants to carve, whereas the shokunin just kind of does what he's told. Maybe they've carved the same thing a million times, but that's just what they do. I feel like that's kind of the interesting difference between, I guess, artist and designer, is that it's not for me at the end of the day. It's what the client wants. And so many times I've designed something that I thought was awful, but the client was super happy with it. So I still have to look at it like it's a successful piece of work, even if I don't personally find it that good. It's not for me. It's their money they're spending on it. Do you know what I mean? So, like you say, it is the balance. But at the end of the day, it's what they want, and we can definitely suggest that they don't do something. But you know the way I see it, like if I tell them that I wouldn't do that, and they say no, that's fine, I still want you to do it, and then I do it, and they're happy with it, then I told them, and that's all I can really do.
All right. Well, so this little show that I have going here, the main theme I want to focus on is something I call creative entrepreneurship, where you take your craft and you find a way to monetize it. So I think we would focus on the service part of it rather than the artistry of it. But then again, you're interested in it because of the artistry. So I guess my next question would just be like, when did you know that being like a designer was something you were cut out to do, like something that you wanted to pursue more seriously?
This is the weirdest answer ever. When I was in high school, the last couple of years, I was taking a design class and an art class, which was painting. And for some reason, I actually dropped the design class to do painting because I was getting kind of like overwhelmed trying to do two at once. And then I don't even remember how I reached the decision to go to I'm not sure what you guys call it overseas, a tertiary education, like a polytechnic for design. And it was actually only after I started doing that I was like, oh yeah, this is really fun. I like this. So I actually cannot remember why I decided to do it. I guess it was just growing up, we're that kind of generation that grew up using Microsoft Word and Paint and a little bit of those artistic programs. And I guess I must have just thought, wow, that's a natural extension of that. And I guess it seems to be working out for me, right? So it's not a very exciting answer, but you know what I mean? I feel guilty sometimes when I see friends that went to university for 4 years, started working in their field, and then realized they don't like it. So it's it was only a year.
But that's a good takeaway. That you do that exploration a lot before you settle on something, and then you can quickly sort of cancel out whatever is not interesting to you or what doesn't resonate with you. Just try a bunch of things. Because I think what you just said about people going to university, we all know these people. I have a bunch of friends back home who went to doctor school planning to learn to be doctors, because that's what you do in Iceland if you have access to higher education. But then the vast majority of them, they're not pursuing medicine right now.
I remember it was explained to me many years ago that the difference between university and a polytechnic was just that a polytechnic was more practical and it's quicker, but you can't learn how to be a doctor or something going there, but and that I thought was it's a very like low investment to a possibly high return kind of system, which is I feel like I'm not one for taking massive gambles like that. I tend to gamble from a very low risk on my behalf position. So in a way, I think that worked out really well. Only having to study for a year when you're like, 18 or 19, that's nothing. You're working part-time when you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, for technical stuff like software engineering, design, these fields are changing so much constantly with new software coming out. I feel that even if you go to university and you think you're getting something higher value, in the end, because they're so long term, they might actually be like a little bit behind on the trends and on the curve.
That's the thing. It takes 4 years, and that's like a quick degree to even get into the field that you wanted to get into, which is just crazy, man. I can't imagine being like, I wonder how I'm going to feel about this in 4 years, and then you find out at the end. It's almost like, I feel like the difference between being a stand-up comedian is like you tell a joke and then immediately you know whether it's funny or not, whereas a musician has to go in the studio and record for 6 months, and then they release the record, and then they get to find out if people like it or not. So it's
and then you go to university, you spend 4 years and then figure out if you're actually good at it or if you like it.
The initial question was how do people monetize their, I suppose it's how do they monetize their creativity or monetize a passion of theirs is the main like nut of what we're getting to. Have I got that right?
Yes. That's the main theme of the whole show, I guess, the creative entrepreneurship.
With any business, I'll give you an example. A friend of a friend that I know, when the Fukushima nuclear reactor thing happened, he started up an online business selling Geiger counters, which is an odd niche in the market, but he made a lot of money selling Geiger counters. And so I feel like you have to look at the because I mean, this is what like a lot of comedians that I know they want to start a podcast, and I'll ask them, okay, what is the draw of the podcast? What is the hole in the market that you're filling? Why should anyone listen to this over anything else that's out there? And they never have an answer. They just want it like, I'm just going to make it and people will listen to it. And it's like, it's not going to happen with any business. You need to be looking at it like you're solving a problem or providing a service that is out there, but it's required, but it doesn't exist yet. So I think that's the same thing. Like if you can draw, you think about other passions that you have, like maybe you listen to a ton of podcasts and you think your art style would work as a podcast cover thing. So then you get amongst it by reaching out, put some of your artwork out there, tweet it at some of your favorite podcasts and say, if you'd like me to make a t-shirt or a cover or some stickers, what have you, for your podcast. And then you just start to build up your portfolio like that. But I think there has to be a gap that you're filling in order to actually start making money off of this kind of thing.
Or at least find something that's being done and you think you can do it better, faster, or cheaper. Yeah, 100%. That always works. That's always, I know, I feel like it happens a lot with apps out there, is people see something then they go, oh, we can do that better, and then it ends up taking it over. Like, I feel like an example maybe would be, you remember how Snapchat started out doing the stories? And then Instagram was like, oh, we can do that better. And so they kind of poached it. And I don't know who's winning that battle. I think it's probably still Snapchat. Maybe it depends on the demographic you look at. But I think Instagram definitely felt like they could do. And then even hasn't Facebook done that as well? They have stories on there as well. Facebook's doing it too now, yeah.
Yeah, so everyone thinks they can do it best. You kind of did remind me of another way that you can... It comes down to fame, doesn't it? Like, I know there are maybe some people that have made their fame in other areas and they've got their name or their brand built up to the point where they can do something like drop a t-shirt line or do some artwork or something, and just based on that association with this person, people will be interested in it. You know, like that the analogy of what is it? If you have 1,000 true fans, you can basically do whatever you want because they'll be with you throughout it.
And they'll buy whatever product you put out.
But I'm going to guess most of the people that are going to be watching this for inspiration are maybe not billionaires that are super famous. There's probably more of an everyman kind of a self-made kind of
Oh,
approach, right?
absolutely, yeah. Or just people who are thinking about, making money online and they want to monetize some sort of creative angle that they have. And people might be willing to explore graphic design if they hear your side of the story. I mean, you mentioned something about if you have a following, people will be ready to buy everything. But I'm thinking now, like, imagine people who have followings. They're always going to need graphic designers to create products for their followers, right? So maybe a graphic designer, rather than being too concerned about building a following, which is always good, of course, but rather than that, try to reach out to people who already have followings and make them an offer.
I've got a good example for that if you'd like it. So there's this comedy show that was run out of a comic book store in Los Angeles called The Meltdown, which it became a big TV show on Comedy Central, and it was very successful, and it was just fantastic. They met a guy, I believe his name was Dave Clock, who was an illustrator who also had screen printing experience, and he was at one of the shows and just offered to start making posters for them, and every week I think he would come up with a new poster with all of the people in it, and then I would imagine just through being associated with them, people would see the work, hey, who did your posters, blah, blah, blah. So that's a really good point, actually, is if you have someone that you're an admirer of with a big following themselves that is accessible to you, then you absolutely can make that work for you as well by, provide a cheap service in the beginning to get your foot in the door and go from there. I think that's a good thought, actually. I hadn't even considered it.
Let's talk about pricing then, because I've known you for a long time, and I know that pricing it can be a challenge. Do you underprice yourself? Do you overprice yourself? When is the right time to increase the price? Yeah. I guess for somebody starting out, like, what would you recommend? Would you recommend doing stuff for free?
I mean, pretty much every designer out there will say, don't do stuff for free. But I honestly think it depends on whether you have a body of work built up or not. Like when I was first starting out in freelancing, I am a big fan of professional wrestling, so I put a post up on an independent wrestling subreddit offering to do really I think it was free logos and that kind of, like, whatever it was. I offered design services. You get tons of emails from people. You pick out the ones that sound interesting, or they're going to give you a good piece for your folio, and you do that. That was because I was starting with basically nothing. That's kind of the way I look at it. Like, I don't see a project as being wasted if the end result is going to add some real beef to your portfolio. That's the only situation I can see. Yeah. People are always trying to undercut designers. You got to do some free stuff to build your body of work up, get a foot in the door, build some good faith, that kind of thing. These can all be valuable. Because, they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And sometimes these favors pay off. Sometimes you get your general prices have risen up to where you feel you want to raise your prices for everyone, but at the same time, the people that were kind of giving you work in the beginning that can't afford to pay more, you feel bad for raising your prices to them, if that makes sense, because they kind of supported you in the beginning. But at the same time, sometimes it's just not you. Like, if you're charging $30 an hour for one design project, and then you've got one that you're charging 15 to 20, it's, you know what I mean? Like, that's an hour you could have spent making $30 versus making $15. So you have to be selfish there and think about yourself at the end. I
guess I'll add to that it's very important that you don't publicly disclose a certain price tag, that for every client, you need to be able to be flexible, to adjust it to their, of course, their what they request of you, but also, like, if they can afford it, you should be able to be confident enough in your abilities to actually charge them a higher price. Because, like, let's say a giant like McDonald's contacts you and says, hey, we want you to design a new M logo. Like, you're not going to sit there and say, okay, give me $15 an hour. No, like McDonald's, McDonald's can afford it. And McDonald's also knows that no matter how much they pay, if it's a freaking good design, that it's going to pay off. So basing on that analogy, it's obviously a scale. So I guess, you need to sort of prospect your clients and sort of ask them a little bit and find out what they're willing to spend.
I also look at it as in how much money are they likely to make off of this. Like, I was asked to do a design for a it was some kind of charity festival that they were going to be selling, and they wanted me to do it for free. And I thought, oh, man, I would, but I know if they're going to be selling it, they're going to be making bank off of it. So you're kind of like, well, you can afford to sling me $50 to do the design. So I ended up turning it down because it all comes down to what do they get at, which can actually sometimes, like I feel bad for certain clients where if I'm doing a logo or something for a service that I think like, man, how is this going to make any money at all? And, they're paying me $30 an hour, whatever it is, to design it, and they're being really picky about it. I want to say to them, like, hey man, like, maybe make sure this business is working before you spend all this money branding it. So yeah, that's another factor to work in, is how much is this design going to make them, what is their return on investment for your time and what they're going to pay you. Yeah.
And I guess this is the downside of something like Fiverr, where you have to publicly disclose your price to everyone. And then you're basically just asking for difficult clients. Like if you're a highly rated seller on Fiverr and you're charging $5 for a design, like,
I have a theory. I don't know this, but this is just based on me thinking about how I would do it to make it profitable. But I have a theory that a lot of the Fiverr, the really cheap ones, are probably templates that they then will just take, type in a new title for the esports team or that kind of thing. That's the only way I can think of to where it would be profitable to, take on some of these things. I think Reddit actually is making it so that you have to put your hourly wage in some of the posts. Like I haven't advertised on there in a while because I've been working the day job, but when I was just kind of moving into working in an office, a lot of the rules were changing so that, because I think it's with people undercutting, it becomes a bit of a race to the bottom. So maybe they were wanting to make it so that everyone had to post their prices up front rather than do it in kind of behind closed doors and be like, oh, if they're going to do it for 40, I'll do it for 30, and it kind of, they start cutting deals. So that is an interesting one. It is frustrating for the client, though, when you want to find out a ballpark range or something and you can't even get an idea from their website,
As a client, using something like Fiverr is super easy, and you can already decide how much you're going to spend before you even find the designer. So there are pros and cons, like the user experience of the client versus the designer. But I imagine one possible good thing to come out of these cheap services is that you can build that relationship. You can have like a more, you can take them off the dating app, so to speak, like you mentioned earlier, and become like a referral for them. Yeah. Finding a day job as a graphic designer in this day and age, do you think it's somewhat easy? Because I imagine this particular skill set is being more and more phased out to being like a freelance type of thing.
Yeah. The designer, it's getting, because stuff like Adobe, the software, is getting broader and broader, and I feel like it's getting easier to use. A lot of the designer's skills are getting, it's like you probably couldn't make it just being a designer. Well, maybe now, but I think in a few years' time, you're going to have to be a web guy as well. You're going to have to be able to do video stuff, or you're going to have to be able to be like an illustrator as well and do that kind of thing, because it's so user-friendly now. Like all of the Adobe software is really easy to use. It's like you almost don't have an excuse for not knowing how to mess around in After Effects as well as this and that.
And I mean, you've done this yourself. You've armed yourself with web design skill set.
Yeah.
So you gotta maybe integrate and have a more diverse sort of toolkit in this day and age.
And I think a lot of clients like being able to have one person that they go to do everything. Like this is the interesting thing about, let's say you're a designer who just has one niche that they do really well. Like let's say you're really good at doing rabbits. Let's say you're just the best rabbit drawer, and you can come up with logos and stuff like that around rabbits on the planet. People come to you from all over the place to do rabbits and stuff. But then what happens if the client goes, "We love the logo that you made. Can you do it? Like, can you do our webpage in the same style, and you can't do it. You can only do the logo. So that's another bit of money you could have made, I suppose. Or they want you to do, go on something else. Like they want you to animate it, and you don't know how to animate. You can only draw it in static. So like quite a lot of my repeat customers are just from the person I did a logo for asking me, can you do brochures? I'm like, yeah, I can do brochures. Like that's, and it just goes from there.
And I guess whenever they ask you, it's important for you just to say yes, no matter what. Because you can just figure it out,
Well, that was how Dave Klock got the role doing the posters. He offered, I think he had illustration experience, but he'd never made posters before. He said to the owner, you guys need event posters, and they were like, do you do event posters? And he was like, yeah, sure, of course I do. And like he didn't, but he learned how really quickly. And so saying yes is always good, because it's quite often you got to think about it from the client's perspective. Is like you want to make it really as painless a process for them as possible. Sometimes people are just difficult, and you know what I mean. No matter how
if you find a good client, you wanna make sure that you're the guy for this client.
Exactly. Like there is definitely something to be said for, we refer to designers firing clients for being difficult like all the time. So it definitely there's something to be said for a good and easy to work for client that pays on time. You don't have to chase them up about it. And they just appreciate being able to, like the guy with Swordsfall, I know he's generally pretty happy to just say, do you know how to make this? I'm like, yeah, I'll figure it out. And then he leaves it to me, and a few days later come back with a design, and we go from there.
Yeah, I guess a good takeaway from this whole chat would then be to establish yourself as the go-to guy for a number of clients for anything relating to design.
This could be an interesting crossover with that whole idea of becoming a personality on social media, and that, as well as being talented across a lot of areas, if they just like dealing with you, it's a big plus, like being positive. I think that does count for a lot, because if they recommend you to someone and they say, this is somebody you can throw a bunch of disjointed ideas. You can trust them.
Somebody reliable.
Take a bunch of disjointed ideas, make it cohesive, and then get back to you quickly, then it definitely goes a long way for people's recommendations.
I've written a book by James Altucher. He says that... James. Yeah, he's cool. He says that once you get a client, you're supposed to be their, thing that they hired you for, but you're also supposed to be their therapist, friend, just everything, right? You're just all of the above.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Remember their birthday. Like imagine you get a high-paying client. Then you send birthday cards. You remember the names of their family members, and you ask them, "How's Timmy doing with the soccer games?" So while it might sound a little like bonkers and exaggerated, it does work. And this is the guy who designed the Miramax website way back in the day, and the Matrix website way back in the day, right? So like he got into that niche of doing like movie websites, and build that reputation with your client. You get recommendations.
Like my boss is very good at this. He's super charismatic, and he will learn stuff about you that he then brings back. Like we were chatting in the breaks room a few weeks ago, and he says, "Oh, it's a lovely sunny day," and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not too big on the sun. I prefer rain." And then he goes, "Oh yeah, well you're always you're in like dark basements doing your stand up, are you?" And just like a little personal connection like that he ties back into it. I was like, you're very good at this. Yeah.
And, finding the bright side of everything as well.
Yeah, exactly. It is interesting.
So I guess that's another takeaway. Just like be a pleasant personality to work with. Most of the times people will work with you because you're not an asshole.
Absolutely.
And if you're charismatic and you manage to be the opposite of an asshole, then all the better, right?
Yeah. Like let's say your design talent is a 5 out of 10, but your personality is 10 out of 10, versus someone who's a 10 out of 10 in design and a 5 out of 10 in personality. People are going to go for the personality person every time. Like, doesn't matter how good you are. If you're not pleasant to work with, then people aren't going to, especially in a free market kind of situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well said.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to close this off with one final curveball that might catch you off guard.
Okay.
Let's imagine you could write anything up in the sky, a sentence that you want the world to see. So everybody would look up and they would see this. What's your message to the world?
Honestly, it would be, like, how many words do we have?
As much as you can imagine.
This is probably not the most succinct way to say it, but I honestly think so many issues would be resolved if people just learnt how to think about it from somebody else's point of view. So whether it's enemies or clients or co-workers, do you know what I mean? Because you look at someone like, oh, you're crazy. But it's like, they don't think they're crazy. What they're doing makes sense to them. And it's just up to us to try and figure out why that makes sense to them. What is the expression? Everyone's the hero of their own story. I feel like it's the same thing where you don't have to agree with their point of view, but you just have to understand why they think that. So I think that would be it. Think about it from their, would be the word I use. Think about it from their point of view.
Oh, that's surprisingly insightful. Did not expect that. A super good takeaway, though.
I try.
All right, Taylor. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I really look forward to editing this one because I think we touched upon a lot of interesting topics for it. So can't wait to show my audience.
Hope they take away something useful for it. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk to you, John.
All right, Taylor. Until next time.
Catch you next time, mate.